Hey guys, this is Jeb Sherrill with the chair system again, and today I'm going to show you how to put stickers on a guitar. Now, again, I do suggest getting a guitar with a blonde fretboard just because the stickers will pop out better, but I'm actually finding they do work on the darker fretboards as well. It's just not quite as bright. Now, I suggest taking the strings off. You can certainly do this with the strings on. I've done it a number of times. I use this Nomad headrest here. I'll try and put this into the description. And with this, you can just pull the strings over the sides and put it on like that. It is difficult, but I've done it a number of times and it does work. But for this video, I'm I'm leaving the strings off. It's going to make it a whole lot easier. So start out with your sheet, and what I want you to do, all you need is a pair of scissors, and I want you to cut it right down the middle. It does not need to be precise. It really, really doesn't. In fact, very little about this does need to be precise, just so as long as you get the right stickers on the right frets. This really doesn't have to be perfect because once you get them on the frets, the pattern's going to be very obvious. So what you do, I personally suggest starting out with the first one and going to the second and then the third and not chopping them all out. You're welcome to do that if you want. I do have numbers beside each one just to tell you which fret is which, but just for ease, I do it like this. I cut along the top, and then I cut right along the fret line. Now these are purposely made slightly larger than the spaces on your guitar because all scale length, well, a number of different scale lengths are different lengths and are different widths. So you're going to have to make them custom, and that's why I make them just slightly larger. As you can tell, that does not fit between the frets, so I'm going to shave that down. I'm particularly going to shave that white part off because we don't need that white part at all. Those little triangles are just enough to show us where the notes up here would be. And as you can tell, since this is a G, E minor set of chairs, all of the notes at the top are part of the scale. So once I shave that down, I give it a shot, and it actually fits almost perfectly. So I may try there, but I think I may shave just a tad bit more because you want enough space that it's easy to get it on there without getting it up on the frets. So I'm shaving this just a little bit more. And I want you to notice that there's a little space. I don't know if you can see that, but there's, maybe a millimeter or two at the top and bottom, so it actually moves between the frets. Take your sticker off, just like so. And what you're going to want to do is try to line this up with the holes in the nut. They're not going to be perfect because nuts are all cut slightly differently. So depending on what guitar you have, it could be different. But I have these little red marks on the edge, which you loosely want to center on the neck. There. Now notice that the chair lines are straight up and down. This very first sticker is really your most important because you're going to be lining up all the rest with it. I've left in the string lines because that also helps you center the rest of the stickers, but all you really have to do is line them up with the chair lines all the way down. So once I get this done, I'm going to wrap this around the back. Because of the curve of the head, it may crumple a little. It's really hard to get away from that. Though this one is turning out pretty good. As you can tell, that has wrapped around the back pretty nicely. And it doesn't quite get to the middle, but almost. It's just enough that you know that sticker isn't going to go anywhere. Now, move to your next sticker. Again, I'm going to cut right along the fret line, or as close to it as I can. You guys are welcome to use a straight edge if you want to do this. I've done this a lot, so this just works much easier for me. But you can certainly lay them down and slice them with a razor if you wanted to. As you can tell, that is a little too much. Now, I used to err more on this side than this side. So in other words, I would shave into the dots because I figured they were easy to see. But I actually like the dots showing as much as possible now. So I shave on this side, on the side of the lines, so that this is showing as much as possible. So I'm just going to take a few millimeters off. And if this cut winds up a little crooked, it really doesn't matter. Keep in mind that all you really need are these lines to show. And so if you have a bit of an angle there and everything doesn't show of the sticker, it really doesn't matter. I think that's just a bit. I'm going to take off a micro fraction, whatever that is. And the reason I do this, the reason I leave space, maybe a little more space than necessary, is because sometimes getting it right between the frets is tricky. And if the sticker winds up on the fret, in other words, if it overlaps the fret at all, then you wind up with a bit of sticker sticking up, and that's not good. You don't want the sticker on the fret itself. If it gets on it just a little bit, that's not a big deal, but if it's sticking up, it can actually get in the way of the string, and that will annoy you a lot. So, we'll put the second sticker on, if I can ever get this apart. Sometimes they come away really easily. Sometimes you have to kind of mess with them for a minute. I had it. There we go. Okay. Now just try and line. Oh, got an extra bit here I need to remove. No biggie. Now, if you ever get these flipped around somehow, there's two things you can check. Make sure that the dots are at the bottom, because the dots are always going to be right against the fret. They're not going to be at the top of the sticker. And of course, check that these lines match up with the lines above them. So if I've got two green lines up there, they're probably going to have two green lines down here. There we go. Now notice that even though there's a little bit at the top, it really doesn't matter. You see the pattern. That's all that matters. You don't worry about having little gaps at the top and bottom. Your brain will just fill that in anyway. Wrap those around, and you have the beginning. And obviously we are now just going to repeat that on down the neck. Now, if you do happen to get one that's very close to the fret, like this one is just touching the fret, so I'm going to take my nail and I'm just going to flatten that out really well. If it's too high on the fret, I'm going to reposition it, but if it's just touching it, it's not a big deal. If you curl this down and you get some weird fold here, you know you're too high on the fret, but this one seems fine. Perfect. Now this is a good example of one that could confuse you because it doesn't have any dots on the bottom to tell you for sure which direction it goes if you get it flipped around. But the good news is all you have to do is put it up here and go, oh, there it is. Okay, the greens match with this chair, the blue matches with that chair, so I've got it right. Now I try to shave in very small increments to make sure I don't shave too much. If I do shave too much, it's not a big deal. Again, that pattern is going to continue. And I have given you 2 sets of stickers, so hopefully that will help. And if you wrap them around and it doesn't look right, you actually can peel them off and do this again. I've had to do that on a number of occasions. This one fits almost perfectly, but I'm going to take off just a little more. You don't have to be able to see the whole dot. If you cut into one of them a little, it is not a big deal. For a long time, I only had like half the dot showing, but I like as much of the dot to show as possible. Now, I'll be honest, guys, I'm being more anal than I really have to be, but I'm trying to get this perfect for the video. But you don't have to be quite this perfect with it. You just need to be able to see those shapes. Now here's one I actually got perfect. It's almost exactly perfect. But I'm going to trim it a little more just because when I put it down, I don't want it to get wonky and touch the frets. So you see now I have a little bit on the top and the bottom, and that's what I want. Now when I reach the next set of stickers, usually I have to scoot my rest up a little bit so it's beyond the stickers. And you'll have to do that a lot, just moving it up and down. But should be good right about here. So your first set of stickers are going to go through 8. And your next set of stickers is going to go 9 through 22. Now notice this one, I've left quite a bit of a gap. So this is a good example. I may have cut a little more off than I usually like to, but I want to show you that it really doesn't matter. So there's a little bit of extra room on the top and bottom, and as you can tell, it doesn't really make any difference. You still see the pattern fine. And don't worry if you're not cutting these perfectly. If you do have trouble with the scissors, it is probably best to use some kind of a straight edge, but getting this absolutely perfect is not necessary. Just so long as you have these chairs so the strings are basically on top of them. It's really just a visual aid anyway. Also, when you're looking down on the guitar, when you're holding it, you're not going to see them perfectly under the chairs anyway because you're at a different angle. Now, something good to notice here, you'll notice there's a little bit of green kind of coming over the edge, and the reason for that is it's showing that this is the front of a chair. It's showing that if this kept going, you would have another back of a chair right here. And so that's just kind of a little extra visual thing, much like this blue one right here where you can see the front of the chair coming off. And this just kind of shows you how this pattern goes into infinity. Here's an example of a sticker that I could actually shave a little closer, but I'm going to leave these little bits of chairs underneath because I actually think it helps. So I'm going to shave on the top, not the bottom. Now, what's really important here is that these stickers are not really for playing over. You can play over these stickers. They're nice and flat, and that's why I made them that way. I mean, I tried to keep them as thin as possible so you could play over them, but the real purpose of all of this is just burning it into your head, is holding this guitar, playing over it, and then switching to a regular guitar because you want to be able to see this on your guitar, not on this guitar. At the 13th fret, we have another one of these where there are no notes. There's no notes in that fret at all, so you have to make sure to line up with the chairs above. The best trick I found, by the way, for getting these right is don't look here when you're cutting, look way up here. Look all the way to where you're cutting, and you'll have the best chance of getting a fairly straight line. Maybe not perfect, but fairly straight. Now when you get down to this area, you'll start noticing that you're running out of neck on the side. On the other side, on the far side, it's usually fine. There's plenty of room there. But on this side, you start chopping, I don't know, maybe about in the middle of the number or just towards the top of the number, depending on your guitar. But you want it pretty flat. You don't want it to go onto the body, because then it might eventually start peeling up. So you want that going down as flat as you possibly can against the side of the neck. Now down here at the bottom, where the stickers get really thin, it can be trickier to get it just right. Don't worry about it. If you shave off too much, you'll still see the pattern. By the time you get here, you're usually above the number, if it's a Strat style guitar. But just chop it to whatever length is necessary for yours. Now one thing I'll say when you get near the bottom is that erring on cutting off too much is probably better, because you really don't want to get up on those frets and start affecting the strings. It won't matter when you're just holding the guitar, but it does matter when you try to play, because when you slide down here, those strings will start touching the stickers if they're sticking up off the frets at all. This last fret is always a little tricky because it is so thin, but that's okay. And there we go. This is the whole fretboard. There is one extra step you can make if you want to. I do this because I use this so much on the videos. You can see the labels coming around the back here, and if you go up and down the fretboard a lot, it could start peeling them up eventually. So what I do, I just get a piece of packing tape about the right size. Again, you don't have to do this, but if you're going to play on it a lot and not just use it as a reference, this might not be a bad idea for you. Put it all the way from the top to the bottom, so it pins down those stickers. You're probably going to have to cut it a little to fit across the heel. And just make sure it's good and flat. So slide your fingers straight down the middle so it's nice and stuck, which I did not quite do correctly. There we go. And go from the middle out. And this will just stop everything from peeling up. Again, I'm going to cut this because the headstock is a little bit curved, and I don't want to make wrinkles as much as possible. And there you are. That is the whole job. All you have to do is restring, and you have yourself a chair guitar.